Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalram, and I just want to make a discussion video talking to you guys a little bit about something I've been seeing happening a lot more often, and it is the question of whether you should be playing and which spec would be the best for PvP, and it's a question between Subtlety, Outlaw, and Assassination. And I've been having this question a couple times in a live stream, just people coming in and trying to figure out which spec would be the best for them to play, as well as a lot of those questions come in the comments, and a lot of people try to argue for their side. I kind of just want to lay all the specs on the table and just objectively define them and have you guys maybe give me some opinions of what you think about this. So this video is really for anybody who is trying to figure out the answer to which spec is the best and my thoughts on it. So this video is an opinion-based piece more or less, but I do have I guess my own examples to provide in order to validate my point. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and please feel free to utilize the like and dislike bar. Like if you agree and dislike if you don't agree with me. So let's talk a little bit about each spec. The one I want to talk a little bit first is about Assassination, because it is a controversial spec. The controversy around the spec is it viable after losing a lot of its CC? But on the other side, Assassination has a lot of damage, so maybe is the damage and the different varieties of damage and just so much raw damage, whether it's burst or sustain, is that validating the lack of CC? And it's a question of, is CC needed? And some rogues just want CC just because it doesn't feel like a rogue anymore. And Assassination, I feel like currently is a viable spec. It does have some stipulations behind it, but I think it's just as viable as any of the other specs. One of the comments that I gotten is, oh wow, it's a surprise, Dalaran, that I've seen Assassination rogues on the top ladders of 3v3, at least on the US servers. And my answer to that is, I'm not that surprised. For the longest time, I've talked about Assassination as, yes, I think it'll be viable in arenas. And if you watch my beta videos, you will see that I did talk about Assassination as, yes, it is going to be viable. It might need to play specific comps, but it is going to be definitely viable. As the trend that happened with Warlords General, Legion is pretty popular with the melee. And any melee that can train a healer or a singular target are currently doing pretty well. As the game isn't like forcing you to have some crazy CC meta, as damage can be enough, and just like a little bit of CC can be enough to score a win. And Assassination brings a lot of damage to the table. And one of the CCs that you bring a Garrote against casters, and you can use that once in a while. Your kidneys are going to be used on a target that you are trying to kill to lock them down, and at most you'll have against a healer or another caster is a step kick. But as was in Warlords General, that was literally enough for you to be able to be viable as a combat rogue. So you basically are taking advantage of what a combat rogue was able to do with the fact that you have raw damage. So it's viable. If combat rogues were viable back in Warlords and they didn't have to have massive CC on everybody else, even yes with the loss of blind, Assassination is viable, as melee cleaves and any cleaves that include a melee are currently very, very strong. So I'm actually not surprised that Assassination is doing well. Is it the best spec in the game though? I don't think so. I think it is benefiting highly from the fact that melee cleaves are really, really strong, and maybe the meta in a couple patches will change, but I still feel like Assassination will retain its position as one of the more dominant melees in the game and one of the higher rated specs for rogues. Now I feel like the best spec objectively is Subtlety. I feel like Subtlety has a lot of mobility on one hand, has a lot of good sustain damage and burst damage on the other, as well as a fair amount of CC. So when we take a look at Assassination, you have a lot of damage but a lack of CC, and that basically makes it so you have to run with specific comps that do provide the CC that is being said. As a Subtlety rogue, you have a little bit more variety of comps that you can play and a little bit more flexibility, because you have like the tricks of all trades. You literally think of tricks of trades ability, how it's the Swiss Army knife. Here you go, you're a Subtlety rogue. You're basically pretty good at just about everything. I wouldn't say you're the greatest at one thing, because you do have Outlaw with the plethora of CC that it has. You do have Assassination with the massive train damage that it has. Outlaw does have pretty awesome bursts that can literally not one-shot you, but maybe 2 or 3-shot you in a very short amount of cooldowns, while literally decimating you in a single global. The Subtlety is a very, very strong spec. It has a lot of damage. It has a lot of synergy with other classes, especially classes like mages. It has a lot of mobility, so you can chase after an enemy target. You have the base CC of saps, cheap shots, kidneys that you can use on an off target, while modifying all your cheap shots to be used on a main primary kill, and a blind, which does put Subtlety ahead in my opinion. If we are taking a look at this spec in its own, and in the future, if the meta is going to be more CC heavy, then Subtlety is definitely going to reign. Right now, it's definitely shining amongst all 3 specs. I actually think all 3 specs of Rogue are really shining like trophies, you know. Probably on the first step, literally in the first place of all melee. I think that Rogues are probably one of the better melees right now in the game currently. And as the meta continues, whether it gets more melee heavy or whether it gets more CC heavy, Subtlety will always have a position, unlike Assassination, which will still be viable in specific comps. And if the meta doesn't change too heavy away from the melee cleaves, then Assassination will be okay. But Subtlety is going to be able to adapt and adjust. You still will have a lot of comps to play with someone like a Mage or maybe a Shadow Priest or even a Warlock, as you do have a lot of CC combinations that you can pull off together. And all you need is another caster or really another class that has enough CC for you to take on 2s or even 3s. And currently I would say that a Subtlety is probably one of the better specs for both 2s and 3s, where Assassination is okay in 2s with against specific comps, pretty good in 3s. Subtlety being pretty good in 2s and pretty good in 3s. Actually probably the best 2 spec, simply because of the amount of CC that you have and the deadly combination with a Mage. Now it comes to Outlaw Rogues. And I've actually been surprised that I'm seeing so many different variants of Outlaw Rogues. Some people are telling me that Outlaw is like the underdog spec, the unplayed spec, the unpopular opinion, and others are saying this spec is ridiculous. It's super strong, it is super interesting. Most people do complain about the RNG mechanic of Roll the Bones, which I do have to include it into this video when we consider it. I feel like Outlaw Rogues are really well designed for arenas, simply because of, not even because of the CC, not even because of damage, but mainly because of tricks of trade and the synergies that they can have in arenas. In arenas, an Outlaw Rogue is a team player, buffing your damage by 15% as well as a friendly's, being able to plunder the armor of the enemy, making themselves deal 20% more damage and taking away 10% away from the enemy's health. This ability can be used offensively and defensively. You have a variety of CC that can be used in more than one way. You have your stuns, which can be applied on a healer, on the off DPS, or on the primary DPS. You have Gouge, which can be used to interrupt casts and interrupt healers. You have Blind, and you have cooldown reduction in order to be able to get those cooldowns back much quicker. It is tied to an RNG buff of Roll the Bones, so there's a little bit less control to it, but once you get the right buffs, then it's like, it's little heaven. It's literal heaven for an Outlaw Rogue. When you get all 6 buffs, you feel like a god amongst, man. It's just impossible to stop you, unless you don't have a trinket and then you get locked down, and that's just very upsetting. But Outlaw, I feel like it holds its own fight fairly well. Is Outlaw Rogue better than any of the other specs? I wouldn't say yes, but I wouldn't say no either. Currently, Outlaw Rogue has a lot of CC and a lot of capabilities to provide CC, as well as team play. The team play allows the spec to be viable. The CC, however, is usually been the bread and butter of rogues, and especially in Warlords General, where you could play a really DPS heavy combat rogue, which was all about training the target, let's be honest. But a Subtlety Rogue, with all the CC that you had and the capabilities for cross CC, made you viable. But Warlords General, as we saw early on, had some capabilities for some Mongo melee, usually involving a combat rogue in a team, be it Combat Rogue Death Knight, Combat Rogue Paladin, Combat Rogue Mage. But the game really did kind of favor any comps that had some kind of a CC setup. So that's why Subtlety was able to perform fairly well, not even suboptimally well, but fairly well, gaining some very high rating and a lot of traction amongst players. An Outlaw Rogue, with the amount of CC that you have, should still be able to see the same fads, but I feel like the game isn't really favoring CC heavy comps. The only comps that are like very CC heavy right now that I've seen is Boomkin Mage, and these guys have to line up their setup, but fully just think of a Smork melee comp, right? Just all about training one single target. If they get a lucky kick, or if they get some lucky crit, I feel like it's fairly easy for melee cleaves to dismantle some heavy CC based comps. And I'm not sure how good CC based comps are, as I'm playing in arenas which is about, it was going between 1600 MMR and 1800 MMR, you know, just trying to get used to the game. Those kind of arena teams that I'm facing are usually a combination of a melee caster, and if they are a double caster team, they seem like they're struggling a little bit against like me being on an Outlaw Rogue with a Warlock and a healer. Or me being on an Outlaw with a Hunter and a healer is even more difficult for them to counter, mainly because of just how much pressure we have on a singular target. I almost feel like if a comp has a melee and a caster, then it can work. If it has double melee, it can work. But if it has double caster, then it's almost like they're on the backhand unless they know exactly how to play the comp. So again, I did say the MMR being like between 1600 and 1800, and you gotta kind of adjust to the fact that 2300 is like a really high rating. So if you look at the inflation, then the numbers will be much higher once the numbers will be adjusted and more people are playing. But in my personal opinion, I feel like melee is just benefiting so highly. And for current meta, Assassination and Subtlety are doing really well. Outlaw is doing okay, and Outlaw might see even a little bit more popularity in the future as if the game ever gets a little more CC heavy. But I feel like right now it's heavily favored to melee. And for a caster, it's like, it's not that much of an issue. For the most part, just it's a caster melee combination comps that are really working well right now. But not really as much as double caster, but that's just my thoughts on it. And I feel like that's why the 3 specs of rogues are performing as well as they are, while Assassination performing fairly well. Subtlety being, you know, as expected, the PvP spec, and then Outlaw being just as compatible and just as viable. But I'm just kind of also trying to predict the trends of adjustments in the future, as the games usually do start in the season. At least they have for the last few expansions with Miss Pandaria melee cleaves, then going to Warlord General melee cleaves, and now we're seeing the same, I guess, same rhetoric appear in Legion with melee cleaves. And I feel like if the game does shift to the CC heavy comps, then Outlaw will see a little bit more play. But currently right now, there's just simple reasons why Subtlety and Assassination are doing really well. Melee are just pretty favored. And this is all I have for today for you guys. Now, that's just some food for thought. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and let me know which spec. When you do answer the questions or comment or anything, I would love to hear which spec you play. Like, if you're just gonna add like quotation or assassination, or I can play Assassination, or I'll play Subtlety, and then continue point, I would love to hear from you guys and see which specs say what. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video. I gotta wake up at 7 AM in the morning, so by the time you guys get this video, I'm in class, drinking coffee, trying to maybe take a nap, catch up back on sleep. But hope you guys enjoyed this video.